Welcome to another episode of Healthcare Connections podcast, powered by Healthcare Compliance Pros. I am your host, Jeremy Wynn. Our purpose for this podcast is to introduce you to key topics and experts in the healthcare industry to ensure you have what you need to successfully manage your practice. Please subscribe and follow us on our social media channels to make sure you don't miss any new episodes. If you have recommendations for guests or topics for this podcast, email me at jwin@hcp.md. With that, enjoy this episode of the Healthcare Connections podcast. Hello, welcome to this episode of Healthcare Connections podcast. I'm Jeremy Wynn. I am the host, director of sales here at Healthcare Compliance Pros, and we're excited to have one of our own on as a guest today. So we've got with us today Chad Schiffman. He is our director of compliance and risk management. And today we've got an exciting episode, a topic of interest, one that we are getting many inquiries about. So we thought it would be timely and appropriate to spend a few minutes on it. So today we're going to talk about med spas and aesthetic medicine. And one of the interesting things is, for our business, we've had many new clients come on board that are in this space. And so it has allowed us to continue to gain additional insights and knowledge on med spa operations and from a compliance perspective, how best we can support and help manage some of their risk. And so today we've got a few key things that we want to talk through, and that's why we have Chad on. So welcome, Chad.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
The med spa market, it's a booming and growing market. The latest numbers I've seen is, over 10,000 med spas
hmm
that are in operation in the US. And one of the unique things about this space is about 80% or so of these med spas are privately owned, and many of them are single location, single owner, and so it has led to this big need as the industry's grown. There's a lot more oversight that's starting to come from a regulatory perspective. So a lot of people are reaching out asking for help and looking for guidance. So one of the first things, Chad, I'm curious, as have worked with these clients and as you've evaluated this landscape of med spas, what are some of the main challenges that you see um, for med spas in the healthcare space?
I think for med spas and aesthetics practices, specifically the aesthetics practices, it's knowing what services they're providing and whether or not they are providing that practice of medicine in any way within their facility and how that is to be regulated. So, Uh, there are a lot of different opinions out there on, is it a med spa? Is it minimally invasive med spa? Are they just strictly aesthetics? Is it aesthetic medicine? Different terminology that each is labeled. And with that comes a lot of confusion because I think a lot of the guidelines are still sort of like, where can we find the best regulations to follow and what are we expected to adhere to? They have, unique challenges in that there's federal guidelines like other healthcare industries that they need to follow, such as HIPAA and OSHA and different things like that, the FTC Act. And then there are other regulatory requirements on the state level, more specifically on the state level, that they really need to pay attention to. Uh, talk, Couple that with if they are affiliated with surgery centers or different things like that, then there are just a whole slew of these challenges that they need to be aware of and know where to go for guidance and support.
Yeah, you mentioned you threw out that word HIPAA, right? Our favorite
Right.
word. That's one question I know, from my sales team as we meet
Mm,
with individuals, they ask us quite a bit is, hey, I some say I don't really understand HIPAA. Some will
mm,
say I know what HIPAA is. Do I need to be following it? To what extent? What does it mean for my practice? So I think it would be good, Chad, if you could spend a few minutes talking about that,
sure.
insights on, HIPAA and guidance that we give to clients, and then, any other thing maybe related to that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, so it's an interesting it's interesting for medical spas and aesthetics because it's like, are they technically a covered entity by the way the regulation is written? And there are different opinions out there whether or not they are. Ask two attorneys and you'll get a different answer.
Yeah,
You'll get one that
definitely.
says, yes, they're a covered entity because they deal with health information, or no, they're not because they don't transmit records electronically. But what we are seeing more and more, and why we think that it's best for med spas just to go ahead and comply with HIPAA as if they are a covered entity, is yes, they are dealing with healthcare information. They often have EMRs that they have business associate agreements executed with the BMR or EMR. So I mean, there's just numerous things that, and then state medical boards saying that they expect these medical spas to comply with HIPAA obligations. Guidance like that just make it seem like it just makes sense for them to make sure that they have policies addressing privacy concerns and making sure that they have policies addressing security safeguards and those things that the HIPAA rule really does a good job laying out in the healthcare industry can really benefit a medical spa and aesthetics practice.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I get asked sometimes about just FTC,
Mm-hmm.
guidelines
So,
as well related to HIPAA. How does that play in?
So it's more broad to where it's more dealing with safeguarding of just general health information, right? And so the FTC Act looks at how organizations are handling that. Uh, a perfect example is like on websites. What type of health information are you obtaining on those websites? What are your marketing activities? Those types of things. So it encompasses a wider scope than HIPAA generally does, where HIPAA tends to be more focused on, while it is focused on individually identifiable health information, it's also more geared towards that protected health information. And so just the overall health information reach from FTC is a little broader.
Okay. Oh, that's great. That's great insight. Um, I think one of the other common questions we get is around state-specific guidelines.
Yeah.
We help people, mainly from, and when I say people, I mean all of our clients across all specialties of healthcare. We really focus in on, federal guidelines and federal regulations. One of the unique things in med spas, and there are some of these elements in every specialty, but we hear it most, I think, from our med spa clients is what can I do in my state? Who can do what are the specific rules? And I think where a lot of entrepreneurs are
Mhm.
getting into med spas, maybe they don't have a healthcare background. And so they're learning sometimes the hard way where they're getting
Mhm.
their clinics shut down for a time. We've had people approach us with that problem. Um, they start realizing, okay, there's some state specific stuff I also need to follow that are unique in my
Sure.
state. I think it'd be good to talk about that for a minute as well and
Sure.
what you've learned.
So from what the response, the work that we've done with our clients and different things, that number one thing is who can own a med spa in each state, and that varies by each state. Um, Almost always there needs to be they're affiliated with a medical director, whether it's generally a physician. In some states, they do allow nurse practitioners and different things like that, but for the most part, it's generally do they have a medical director that's a physician that they're affiliated with? And then from there, it's the supervision requirements. And
Mhm.
that varies by state. Uh, what procedures need to be supervised, whether that's general or direct supervision. I mean, there are some considerations there. And who can perform those procedures? Is it within the scope of a nurse practitioner? Is it within the scope of a physician assistant? Or can a medical assistant perform things like lasers, or can they do injections? I mean, there are all these different questions that come up and concerns, and they vary by state. And, there's been some stories of med spas that have had medical assistants doing procedures that they shouldn't do, or maybe doing somebody who is maybe not even by definition a medical assistant, but an unlicensed individual performing things that has led to them being shut down. And so it's really important to pay attention to what state medical boards are saying, and then also what additional guidelines and guidance they can find from other organizations. So,
Yeah. I just know when somebody first asked me, a while ago, I had a client we were talking to say, "Who can fire a laser at my practice?" And I said, "That
Oh,
sounds like a cool job. How do I get
right,
that job? I want to go fire the laser." And so yeah, it's been interesting to hear all the unique questions again, and a
right.
lot of times it's hard to know where to even go to find this information.
Yeah,
Um, Maybe talk briefly. I know you've worked pretty hard on um, ways to put some really cool resources and things together for our clients with some of those guidelines. Maybe talk about that a little bit as well.
yeah. So one of the things that I'm excited about is we do have a frequently asked questions in numerous states that we've put together, and that takes about the top 15 questions or so in each of those states, and really has them laid out to those responses, including like, do we need to have a medical director, and if so, what's their title? Does it have to be a physician? Those types of things, or does a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant need to be on site every day, or what days would they not need to be there, or what can my medical assistants do? Can they perform injections? Who can perform IPL? Who can perform cool scoping? I mean, different things like that that we've answered that get pretty granular, but it's really nice to have that resource. Additionally, we've developed some trainings for medical spas that I think and aesthetics that are more geared for the challenges and nuances that they face versus being just for a general covered entity, because there are some variances there. Like for example, perhaps there's some cosmetology laws in certain states that we need to bring into their training and different things like that. So we've really tried to focus it more on med spas and aesthetics versus just general healthcare industry.
Yeah. Okay, this one's not maybe the most important question, but I know I've messed this up, and I'm curious your opinion. Is it semaglutide or semaglutide?
Oh boy,
How do you pronounce it?
it depends. I've heard it pronounced both ways, I'm not quite sure. I've heard it semaglutide, and yeah, I mean that's how I. But I'm not going to take a stab at that because I'll get it wrong.
Okay, I just know the first time I was trying to sound smart and said it on a call, I said semaglutide, and they quickly corrected me that it's semaglutide. So
That's my understanding. I'll be honest. I've called it
okay,
semaglutide, but again, I'm not quite sure. That's how I'd probably sound it out. And I'm
great.
thinking, how would I say Ozempic? And I just say it Ozempic. So
There you go. All
there we
right.
go.
I guess we're coming up on our time here. Any last words that you would get in of advice to med spas? So if there's anybody out there looking to invest in a med spa or open their own med spa, maybe they're a dermatology practice that wants to
Mhm,
add a med spa, as onto their
mhm.
practice. Maybe words of advice from Chad Schiffman.
I would say that the biggest thing is understanding what the federal and state implications are for where you are opening your med spa. Really kind of pay close attention, get a sense of what others are doing in the area, find out what's been working for them, and then make sure that you think about compliance, think about what you need to have, what types of policies you need to have, just to ensure you're safe. Make sure your web page is set up right. I would honestly say make sure that you've addressed any non-discrimination things. I mean, things like that have become really big in the healthcare space, no matter what it is, even cosmetology. So, just numerous things to think about that they can really look at from all angles to make sure that they're protected. And happy to say that we have a lot of those resources covered for them.
Great. Well, Chad, thank you so much for your time today and your insight. For those of you who are operating med spas or looking to operate a med spa, reach out to us with any questions. Our website is healthcarecompliancepros.com. And again, my name is Jeremy Wynn, Director of Sales here at HCP, and our guest has been Chad Schiffman, Director of Compliance and Risk Management. Chad, thanks for being on today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Healthcare Connections podcast. For more information on the topic we covered today, you can reach out to me or to our guest. For any additional information on Healthcare Compliance Pros, feel free to email me at jwin@hcp.md. Don't forget to tune in next week. Thank you.